Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Jones. Welcome to interCHANGE. Thank you so very much for joining us. Tonight, we'll talk about President Obama still trying to sell his agenda. We'll talk about whether Milwaukee is a very safe city. We'll talk about the Packers getting ready for the Super Bowl. Joining us tonight, our newspaper columnist, Joel McNally. Longtime State Senate Republican aide and oftentimes a host over at WISN Radio, Kevin Fischer. Denise Callaway, the coordinator of business and community partnerships for the Milwaukee Public School System. And Gerard Randall, consultant and local job creation expert. Rick Horowitz will be along with commentary at the end of the show. First, let's talk about Obama's State of the Union speech and the response from Wisconsin Congressman Paul Ryan. Obama basically kept bringing up the same old themes, and Ryan pretty much told America, you better wake up and face all the financial problems we have. I heard one critic, Joel, say Obama looked like he was campaigning, and Ryan looked presidential.
Wait a minute, you said,
Yeah,
Joel, looking over here. Who do you really want? Dan.
Gerard.
I thought he was going to go to me.
it was the just.
We're frequently confused.
I didn't think it was the president's best speech, but I've come to accept that State of the Union addresses now are more fluff than promise. And this particular speech, he did lay out what he's hopeful he'll be able to accomplish in the next year or so. In all honesty, I don't think that he's going to be able to sell the American public on, and certainly he won't be able to sell one House of Congress on much that he had laid out in his package of initiatives. Paul Ryan, while much of what he had to say was dour news, and again, it reminded me of the days when both Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan had to deliver uncomfortable news to America. It had to be done. The deficit is driving this country to the brink. I believe that. And I think he too had a tough time selling America that our economic woes are going to force us to have to limit ourselves on a lot of things. That's the challenge, though, that both parties will have going forward into this next year and certainly prior to the national elections. Which of their messages is going to resonate more with the American people? One of realism and one that I don't know how you can build a theme around it that isn't going to sound like what the president had already built a theme around, and that's hope, but it'll be hope undelivered.
Denise, I thought it was so bizarre, though, that he came to Wisconsin the next day, a state that pretty much has overwhelmingly rejected everything he stands for, kicked the Republicans, or kicked the Democrats out of the state capitol. The head Republican in the country now, head of the Republican committee, is from Wisconsin. We didn't want his train system, yet he comes here to sell this program that he spoke about the night before. I thought,
well, now let's kind of look at a bigger picture.
Yeah.
It's a state that voted for him in 2008, and it's voted for Democrats for the past 3 presidential elections. So, I mean, it's a state that certainly is not a state that's all gloom and doom. It doesn't want to hear what the president or what any Democrats have to say. And I would kind of, don't want to bring this up again, but not everybody thought that the train was a bad idea. But I think the president came here, and it's something that's hopeful for us here in Wisconsin, because we are a place where innovation is taking place in some of these key areas that really are going to be important to the economic growth of this country in this century. He's visiting places where innovation is taking place. He's visiting places where the things that he talked about doing in the State of the Union are things that might not are not, it's not a situation where we're hoping they can happen. It's where these situations are happening now, where we're finding this green technology really taking off and doing a couple of things. First of all, it's helping the environment. Secondly, it's creating jobs, which is the mantra in this state and in every other state. So he came here because it was a smart place for him to come, because here in Wisconsin we're doing great things, and he recognizes that.
But Kevin, green energy is not going to create that many jobs, no matter how hard you try to sell it.
No, and the place he visited has lost millions and millions of dollars.
I know.
And even their own head person said that green is not necessarily the future and may not bring the jobs that some people imagine. As far as the speech went, I was disappointed for 2 reasons. One, I found it uninspiring. I expected more from this president who does give a good speech. And just don't laugh, okay? For once, be respectful and listen to what I have to say.
You wanted to be inspired by
I wanted
Barack
to be.
Obama. What would he have to do to inspire you?
You
I
know,
wonder?
he's this like Reagan, this great communicator. And I'm sorry, I was uninspired, and there was no gut level sense of urgency about what you talked about, Dan. The debt and the deficits. He doesn't seem to understand or have a grasp of the fiscal mess that we are in. He talks about doing big things in America, but then spends a lot of time over and over again using the term investments, which is code for spending. And he wants to innovate, all right? Well, innovation doesn't come from big government and big spending programs. It comes from individual initiative. That's what's going to get this country back on its feet again. Great speech? No. NPR, not exactly a conservative news organization, heard from 4,000 listeners. It asked its own listeners to sum up the speech in 3 words. And overwhelmingly, the word that comes to mind was salmon. And I thought that was pretty funny. I thought that was a pretty good line. But if that's what people are going to take from this speech, which I thought was going to galvanize the center, I thought, like Clinton did in '96, and he did it so brilliantly, I thought to get more support and to garner more votes for the future, that he would move to the center. And he didn't do that. His idea for innovation and solving America's problems is more government, more spending, and we just can't do that, as Congressman Paul Ryan pointed out. We can't replicate the past years of bigger debts and bigger deficits.
You know, he is a good speaker, though, because you were watching the speech. I don't agree with hardly anything he says.
No, neither does Kevin, but he wanted to be inspired.
But he was a good speaker. You kept thinking, wow, this guy really knows how to work the crowd. And as a matter of fact, the cover of, I didn't read it yet, but the cover of Time that arrived at my house today said, "Why Obama Loves Reagan." You know, and I'm sure part of it is going to be communicating, and he is good at communicating.
And I was glad, frankly, for a number of things. The fact that he did talk about how the things we do have to spend money on, which is creating jobs by building the infrastructure, by going for the jobs of the future in the green industries, by transportation and high-speed rail, rebuilding infrastructure, the things that we are behind on. If these Republicans over here were really concerned about the deficit, why in the world would they want more tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires that are going to cost $700 billion?
Because they invest their money
in
places
that he hung in there also, and even though he had to make a deal with the Republicans to give those tax breaks to millionaires, and that seemed to be the only thing they cared about, tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires to get, repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell, some of the many other things that they accomplished in the lame duck session. I was glad of that. The other thing is he brought up the issues that they don't want to deal with. Immigration, that he's going to continue to fight for immigration reform. They want to continue just whipping up hatred against Latino immigrants. The Paul Ryan speech, though, to me was fascinating. Here was Paul Ryan's chance on a national stage, and I will say he looked great. You look into those big puppy dog eyes and this good-looking guy from Wisconsin, and you could almost ignore some of the really vicious things he was saying. And the worst
What
of
did
which,
he say that was vicious?
The worst of which, the safety net in this country for the poorest people in this country, he referred to as a hammock, where they could lay around, loll around, and not have to work. I haven't heard that kind of rhetoric, hate rhetoric toward poor people in this country, particularly at a time when there are no jobs for people who want to work at, for them to be called lazy bums for the fact that they're out of work. I guess that's why the Republicans voted against unemployment insurance for people who are out of work, because they hate those people. And that is
no, we don't.
To hear that,
garbage.
To hear that,
can't you for once come on this program and not use the hate word? We don't hate anybody.
Believe me.
And he didn't say people were lazy. And
he said they were laying around in hammocks.
He didn't say they were bums.
Maybe they were on vacation.
The country is broke and we just can't keep spending ourselves into
oblivion. But you can keep spending $700 billion for millionaires and billionaires.
All right, next topic. Let's talk for just a minute about crime in Milwaukee. The police department reported this week that violent crime here was down for the 3rd year in a row. There were 94 murders last year, a huge increase from the previous year. But overall, violent crime, homicide, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, was down 7% from the previous year. Property crimes fell 10%. Is Milwaukee getting to be a safer city, or is it still a place where you should be darn scared if you're walking down the street after dark?
Well, I take precautions when I walk down the street after dark, even if I'm just getting out of my car and walking across the street to my home. You still have to be careful. There's a certain level of personal responsibility that you have to take for your own safety. I will say that police presence is more visible in my neighborhood, certainly, and I'm certain in other high crime neighborhoods, or those neighborhoods that have been targeted as high crime neighborhoods. You certainly have a faster response time. I've noticed that also in my neighborhood, that when police are called, they seem to get there pretty quickly. The drop in the rate that is ongoing, I think some of it can be attributed to the fact that you've got so many repeat offenders that are behind bars. And you also have a situation on the reverse side where those crimes of passion, like murders, those are very difficult to control. And so I'm hopeful, on the one hand, that this drop, maybe it shows that some of those initiatives that have been put in place are working. I think those are many of the same initiatives, frankly, that had occurred under Chief Jones. So I'm grateful that some of these things are working. It's coming at a high cost, though. We're still talking about a lot of manpower. We're talking about a lot of cost to taxpayers that will have to bear, local taxpayers that will have to bear the brunt when some of those federal dollars start to run out that support the force.
Do we still have to listen to the call that the union has every year? We need more cops, more cops, more cops if the numbers are going down?
I don't think it's manpower. Chief Jones was one of the first chiefs that was honest enough to say we don't need more police officers. The crime is down across the country. All across the country. And to some people that's counterintuitive because they assume that during bad economic times it might go up. But it's been going down. I do think Chief Lynn runs a good department. I think that he has a better philosophy than many recent police chiefs about community policing. And that the community policing is not just occupying the neighborhood, it is working with the neighborhood and knowing the people in the neighborhood. And you know, if the police look like an alien force, they're not going to get as much information, which they need to get out of a community in order to stop crime, to prevent crime. But for the most part, police, and I don't blame them for taking credit when crime goes down, police come along after the fact. They come along after the crime has been committed. And, you know, we have a good clearance rate and all of that. But I think, you know, we give too much, you know, credit to the fact that, you know, if it's down, the police are doing a good job, and if it's up, they're not. No, it's not. The fact that homicides are up slightly this year is because they were down so much last year and the year before that. And, you know, sometimes the difference between a high number of homicides is whether, you know, how good a shot the guy was who was the perpetrator, or how good the medical care was, how good the medical care was for someone who'd been injured.
You know, it does bother me that they keep track of homicides. The media does, almost like a record every year.
Yeah.
A detective told me once you could put a cop on every single corner on every single block in the city, and you're not going to have that much of effect on the homicide rate because they're usually crimes of passion.
Crimes of passion between people who know each other. Yep. You know, and you can't control the circumstances oftentimes that lead up to a homicide occurring. I mean, those are things you can't control. But I do think that Chief Lynn has really been diligent about raising the presence of police in neighborhoods before crimes take place. I think they've done a really good job of doing that kind of outreach, being part of the community, and really working hard to make sure that they are a presence before crime takes place. And I do think that that's one thing that adds to the lowering of the crime rate. I think you're right. You can't always say that when there's a decrease in crime, it's all due to the police. But I do think in this case, they've played over the past couple of years a strong role in really doing a lot more community outreach, working with the community, being seen as part of the community. And I think that does make a difference when you see that crime statistics go down.
And Kevin, aside this controversy over the radio system aside,
Yeah,
I do like the fact that he does seem to stand up for his officers all the time.
Well, if there's any credit to be given for these numbers, I think it goes to the officers. I think it goes to the rank and file. I think it goes to our criminal justice system for locking away the repeat offenders. Our police do a good job and always do a good job. Having said that, I think the numbers are somewhat meaningless. What's that old phrase, perception is reality? If you survey residents, north side, south side, east side, west side, and ask them, do they feel safer? Do they think Milwaukee is a safer city in the past year? I bet the resounding answer would be no.
And what's to blame for that? Isn't it the media overemphasizing crime?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. You know, when your lead story every night on the 10 o'clock news and on radio is this shooting and that shooting, the perception is that you can't walk down the street at night, that you can't go to the Grand Avenue Mall, that you can't walk down Wisconsin Avenue on a Saturday night, which is crazy. It's just crazy. About the radios, yeah, I think the police chief has dropped the ball on that one, and I think some aldermen are right to criticize. If you have a faulty radio system, and I think the data is there, the evidence is there, that this radio system is completely kaput.
But they had to move away from the old system.
They did, but to replace that system with another inferior system that is putting the lives of citizens and officers
as
at risk.
They see the problems, they're correcting them, though.
When a radio system goes down for minutes and minutes and minutes at a time, you have officers that could be killed. You have innocent citizens that could be killed. That has to be addressed. The reality is, that has to be addressed. And this police chief has not demonstrated any will to do anything about it.
That's true.
And you've got Milwaukee aldermen who are holding him to the fire. And I
don't think that's true. And I think the other thing that people tend to forget conveniently is that the old radio system also had its problems. The old radio system would go down as well. I think the thing that some people don't like about this new radio system is that they cannot hear. No. It does work. But it has problems. Those problems are being fixed, which is not the case in the last old system.
Because the system is still
I think
busted.
what some of these folks don't like, the media included, is the fact that under open sky, you can't hear the police calls. I think that's the issue for some people. You can't hear the police calls.
Wouldn't you say, Denise?
Well, I think the police can hear the police calls, and that's what my main concern is. Do they have a system that they feel is providing them with the best opportunity to be safe and respond? And right now, it's a system that is working, though it has problems. They're working to address those problems.
And every government gets in trouble when they adopt new technology, because the people who run governments don't understand technology. The people who are buying the systems don't understand technology.
That doesn't make this right, though.
No, but what I'm saying is they're dealing with the problems. They have to see the problems before they can improve them, before they can deal with them. And they're putting up new towers to deal with the parts of the city that some reason this radio.
There's officers about the dispatch problems they're having with that system.
The price tag that the public was sold on at the time that it was initially implemented is a lot different than the price tag that for ongoing maintenance and fixing some of the problems that have occurred with it. And
it's like the state computer system.
Exactly. Those are the pieces that I think are rankling a lot of folks.
Buying new technology.
All right, next topic. For just a few minutes, we have to be just like everybody else in the state of Wisconsin and talk about the Super Bowl. Are these two evenly matched teams, and who has the better quarterback?
I've said every week so far that nobody's showed they could beat the Packers, and this has been such an exciting, not just postseason, but leading up to the postseason, and I think it's going to be a great Super Bowl that the Packers are going to win, and I think it will be a good game, but I haven't seen any other team that can beat them yet.
I like the discussion about whether or not Rodgers had a concussion. I think the team in the league are kind of bearing that because he did seem to lose his edge after that hit.
Well, I mean, I think you can lose your edge without a hit as vicious as the one that he took and not necessarily have a concussion. I mean, I do believe, with particularly the attention the league is paying to concussions this year, that if he had a concussion, they would certainly have come out and said that he had a concussion. They would have. So, I mean, I don't think that's necessarily what happened. But I do think he's the better of the two quarterbacks, without a doubt. And I think that they are going to be victorious on Super Bowl Sunday. They're going to bring the Lombardi Trophy back to Green Bay, it's always a good thing to have that there. But, I do think that they are a better team, and I certainly feel that there is momentum on their side. I mean, look at the number of injuries this team has had and continues to be plagued with. And, you know, it's like a revolving door of players who are able to step in and do what needs to be done. And though it pains me to say it, the person we have to thank for that is Ted Thompson. This is Ted Thompson's team. He built this team, and he built a team that seems to be indestructible and able to kind of bounce back from whatever. Oh, you don't like it. I know you don't like it. But this is Ted Thompson's team. You take a look at the draft picks over the past couple of years. Ted Thompson has built this team into what is going to be a Super Bowl championship.
In today's paper wasn't willing to go that far. And for this reason, I think he's right. Before you can lay all these accolades on, whoa, those were great draft choices and those were great personnel moves, those guys have to show, like the last Super Bowl champion team that we had in Green Bay, you have to show consistency and longevity. And it's too soon to start saying that
this run has been pretty consistent.
It is, but you know, I think you can't dismiss Pittsburgh. They are 6-1 in Super Bowls. Roethlisberger is tough quarterback, and is durable and just wins. This Green Bay Packer team, yeah, that was nice last week, knocking off the Bears, but they almost had a third-string quarterback who played only 5 games in his career come back and send that game into overtime where anything can happen. Green Bay has the second-best defense in the league. Defense wins championships. Pittsburgh has the best defense in the league. They cannot be taken lightly.
There weren't that many games this season where the Packers looked dominating. I mean, there were a lot where they
lost
just
to Cleveland.
made it. They just made the win, but they haven't looked dominating.
Something, too, that I'll flip back to, and that is whether or not these guys, which had been that far from being called GOATs for a lot of the decisions that they made around personnel and the like, to now being called greats. And I think consistency is going to be the key. Can they come out of the Super Bowl? And frankly, I'm one of those guys that would have said they didn't make some personnel decisions that were the right decisions, starting with Brett Favre. Well, I'm going to be one of those who will admit I was wrong. They do look like they've made some great decisions. And can the decisions that they made translate into another run at this next year? Because everybody will be gunning for them. Will they still have that hunger in them that they are certainly showing?
They're going to have a lot of those good players
a lot of young, good players
that were their starting players.
That will be the key. You know, will those guys that are certainly on their way out hold them hostage for more money and less output?
Okay, we continue. You know, some places are used to having their moments in the sun. Here in Wisconsin, not so much, which is why these past few days have been so extraordinary. Rick Horowitz has some thoughts about the Badger State and how it rises to the occasion, or doesn't. Rick.
Talk about being in the spotlight. Wisconsin, I mean. On Wednesday, the president was up in Manitowoc, his very first stop after his State of the Union speech. And who gave the official Republican response to that speech? None other than Wisconsin's own Paul Ryan, the new chairman of the House Budget Committee. Did a nice job, too. Didn't pull a Bobby Jindal. But wait, there's more. This week's American Idol went looking for talent right here in Milwaukee. How about that for excitement? And isn't there some kind of football game next weekend with the local team trying to win some kind of trophy? A ton of attention, and most of it perfectly good attention. I mean, the president wasn't just here to use up his frequent flyer miles. He was here to show off 3 Wisconsin companies doing new and innovative things to help the United States compete in the world. These were exactly the kinds of folks he'd been talking about on Tuesday night. People who are doing big things, as the president put it, in a country with a history of doing big things. So here we are in Wisconsin, right at the cutting edge of the kinds of progress he was talking about. New research and development, high-speed internet access even in remote places, high-speed rail to link up our great urban centers and build up... Oh, wait, I almost forgot. Wisconsin's the place that said no to high-speed rail. Wisconsin's the place with the new governor who rejected the hundreds of millions of dollars in federal aid to build the thing. The new governor who thinks roads are all we need, more asphalt and more concrete. More cars, more gas, more pollution, more. And he's hardly alone in that kind of thinking, of course, in having a different vision of Wisconsin's future, different priorities. That's why the folks in Madison, as one of their first items of legislative business this year, decided to protect Wisconsin companies from costly lawsuits, even when their shoddy products and negligent behavior hurt innocent people. And that's why the folks in Madison decided to require voter ID cards. They'll crack down on a tiny handful of illegal voters by making it harder for tens of thousands of other people to vote. You know, big things on Wisconsin.
Well, thank you, Rick, sort of. And thank you so much for watching. Stay warm. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.